Hey, it's Shekinah, aka the Purpose Therapist, and today we are talking all about fear and heart health. This is a stress free series where we talk about things that might be adding to our stress or figuring out how we can navigate different things around our heart health and mental health. Today we're talking all about fear. We're thinking about different things that kind of like are showing up in media, information overload, just all types of different things that we see on a regular basis. Those things have an impact on us, right? So we want to learn how we can show up, manage our stress, manage our fear, and make sure we're taking care of our hearts. I hope that you have a pen, a paper, and you're ready to get into it. So you might be wondering, like, okay, Shekinah, we've been here before. Like we do this every so often, but what is the connection between heart health and fear? Like, what does one have to do with the other? Well, friend, a lot. Okay, adrenaline and things like that impact our hearts. And we'll get to it in a moment. But we have this innate thing called the fight or flight response. And sometimes when we are in these moments of like high stress or high energy, or we feel threatened, then that's when it starts to impact our physical senses. Now, you might not see it immediately, but it does impact our heart and it does impact our day-to-day lives. So we want to make sure that we're learning how to identify those things and be able to kind of filter through so we can show up things that might be causing you fear and a little bit of extra stress that you might not have noticed before. Watching the news and seeing things that it's okay to be informed, but there is such thing as information overload, so being careful around that. Sometimes like very traumatic events in your neighborhood or around you and within your community. There's a lot of things that are sometimes out of our control, and being able to identify those things can be a little bit difficult. And then that's when the fear comes in. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to manage this? Things are changing all the time, and it's possible to be on high alert all the time unless you identify that that's what's happening. Take a step back, address the situation, and lean into how we can start to navigate our heart health and how it's impacted by fear. So that's what this conversation is all about today. Super duper excited, and let's get started. So first thing I want to do is help us really understand, well, what is fear? Like, I'm not scared of anything. I'm terrified of bees and wasps. Like, terrified. But you might be saying, I'm not afraid of anything. Like, what is that? Okay, well, let me help you get a little bit deeper. So fear is an emotional response to perceived threats. Okay, and perceived threats don't also always have to be physical threats. They can be emotional threats. They can be emotional threats. They can be threats on your job, threats in your community, threats within your family. There can be threats even with things just as related to like a little bit of social anxiety or being nervous about going to certain places. All these things can muster up some fear in you. And unless you learn how to manage it, it can start to impact your heart health. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about understanding fear, I'm not talking about being afraid of that snake over there or being afraid of dogs. I'm talking about other things that perceive to be a threat. So I want you to take a moment right now and kind of just think to yourself, what do I really perceive as a threat? What do I feel like is a threat to my job or my well-being? What do I feel like is a threat to my health? What do I feel like might be a threat to my community? What do I feel like might be a threat to my mental health? These things are things that can sometimes incite the same symptoms of fear. I want us to make sure that we're kind of like curating our thoughts around that. And here's what I also wanted to talk about or help us understand is our brain's role as it relates to fear. So if you have like a little fist like this, I like to use this example all the time. But if you make a fist like this, on the inside of this fist is your amygdala. Our thumb, this is our amygdala. This controls all of our emotions and things like this. This right here is our prefrontal cortex. When we're in the middle of our fight or flight response, the different adrenaline and the hormones make your prefrontal cortex react, right? And so when it reacts, it's harder to maintain, harder to manage those different emotions, and harder to manage those different symptoms around your heart health. So you want to make sure, again, that you're checking out all those things, checking all your boxes, and making sure that you're taking care of yourself around filtering through what might be perceived threats for you. So if you're new here, you might be wondering, what is heart health, right? And so heart health is, by definition, it refers to the overall well-being of your cardiovascular systems. Its importance is good heart health is crucial for longevity and quality of life. Okay, so when we're able to respond to certain things, the healthier your heart is, the easier it is to manage certain experiences that you might be having. It's less stressful, less stressful on your heart function and things like that, when you're able to identify what are the things that threaten me and how can I navigate, what are my coping skills for those things. It helps us to kind of like rebuild from the inside out how to protect ourselves as we fluctuate through day-to-day life. you want to know these tools. You want to kind of be proactive to this instead of reactive, so that when circumstances come, you don't fall apart. You maintain a certain level of balance and stability because you understand the functions of these different things, and your heart has to be able to do the same thing as well. Being able to maintain a healthy lifestyle allows you to be able to manage a lot of life stressors a little bit better too. The life outside is enough, and like the things that we see on the news and things like that daily, that's enough. So when you think about how that can be impacted on a healthy heart versus an unhealthy heart, the symptoms or the severity of the situation might be a lot different. So we want to make sure that we're identifying those things and taking care of ourselves in that fact, so we can show up in a better version of ourselves. So, reference to what I was talking about earlier, acute stress response, fight or flight, okay? Fight or flight is the body's immediate response to a threat. There's physiological changes that release adrenaline, increase heart rate, and elevated blood pressure. And this is where we get to the nitty-gritty of understanding how these things can be impacting our heart health. We have some more that we're going to go over a little bit later, but this is it, guys. Understanding our fight or flight response. When you're in these moments of high intensity, your body, you might even physically be actually safe. You just are a little bit nervous about a thing, right? And your body responds the same way. It can't tell the difference of a perceived threat and an actual threat. It just knows what your brain is telling it. And so it prepares in that way. Now, when we're thinking about like our more social stressors or social threats and how those can be impacting you on day to day, you can be in a fight or flight response all day, every day, and not even realize that you're doing it. So trying to make sure that we're like calming ourselves, being more mindful, being more present will help us get to a point where we can navigate this a little bit better. Understanding the release of adrenaline and increased heart rate, they're there to protect us so we can achieve success through that thing that's causing us a threat. But then once we've gotten to that point, how do we bring ourselves back down? How do we manage like not letting it impact us on a longer scale for a substantial amount of time? How do we work towards building a resilience, if you will, and making sure that while you're navigating that space of resilience, you can also take care of yourself and your heart? Yeah? Okay, so that's where we're at. So I want you to think for a moment at this point. I want you to think for a moment for yourself. What are some things that are perceived threats, like we talked about earlier, but then how can I start to put a filter in place for my mind to help me navigate that part a little bit better, so that I'm not adopting the threat as true? A threat and facts are two completely different things. Something might be threatening, but that doesn't mean that it's actually going to harm you. So you have to make sure that you're giving yourself a moment to make that distinction, and then move forward that way. So getting to the point of our stress, chronic stress, ongoing fear can lead to sustained stress levels. Health risks like higher likelihood of heart disease, hypertension, and other cardiovascular issues. Just like I mentioned before, it's imperative because of this, okay? You want to make sure that you're navigating things. The chronic stress is a thing. Back to back circumstances, threats from work, threats from your social settings, threats from wherever. All of those things can be impacting how your heart is managing, right? When our heart gets into that, with that adrenaline pumping, it's pumping. It's doing all these different extra things to get as much blood as possible, give us as much function as possible to be able to manage the thing that is threatening us. But then once that threat is over, or once it's been an hour to 2 hours, okay, a couple days, a couple weeks, now we have a problem. Now we have buildup. Now we have all these different things that your heart is exhausted because it's having to overwork itself. So we want to make sure that we're navigating our stress levels so that we're not in that place of chronic stress, and we're not in that place of like being in hypervigilance and always being on edge around this, right? And again, I want you to try to take inventory. What are the perceivable threats? What are the things that I'm doing? How can I implement protection for myself while I'm navigating, basic life stressors? And so I wanted to take the time right here to discuss the other health concerns. Arrhythmia, abnormal irregular heartbeat, emotional triggers like fear can induce arrhythmias in some cases. Hypertension, long-term fear can lead to elevated blood pressure. Cortisol, the stress hormone that influences blood pressure. All these things pack up in your heart and can cause you all types of other health concerns. So you want to make sure that you're navigating that, right? You want to make sure that you're navigating that these different things, these different stresses exist, and figuring out ways to manage them in a way that's healthy for you and on a consistent basis. I've talked to you guys about this before. You want to make sure that whatever we talk about tools wise, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna wake up in Shekinah and I'm gonna take care. I'm gonna journal for a moment. I'm gonna do a guided meditation during my lunch break. I'm gonna do some yoga after work. All these different. That's awesome. That is fantastic. But you got to be consistent. Okay, we got to be consistent, and we want to make sure that those things that we're adding are things that can actually be executed in a very consistent and effective way. I'm not the person that's going to tell you to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go meditate if you can barely get up at 7. Make it make sense. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing for yourself is working with you, not against you. Okay, so that's what this is. This is an opportunity for you to find those things that work for you, implement them, and push for it. So here's some tips or some thoughts that we might have to be able to help us get into a place of better heart health, managing our stressors, managing our fears, and not letting fear control us. Brene Brown does this excellent thing. She talks about how fear is a tool for us. And it can be in the car with us. It helps us in places of danger. It's the thing that makes us stop or makes us go the other way or not pet a snake. Like, that's what fear is for. But at the same time, it can be in the car with us, but we have to make sure we're driving the car. It could be a passenger. It can tell us where to go. It can help us out, just like our little GPS, just like the people that we ride the passenger car with, help us navigate where we want to go. It can help in that way, but it can't take over in that way. Okay, so let's think about that part.